Hey, Alex, how are you?
I am good. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, we missed you in Washington, D.C. at the beginning of June. I know you had a very important birthday to celebrate. So attended the inaugural Open Banker Salon for the two of us.
I am happy that you attended. I was very jealous that you got to and I did not, because that was one that was definitely on my list of events I wanted to go to. As you know, my quest is to just avoid going to the same big
Uh-huh.
fintech events over and over again as much as I can anyway, and
Yeah.
instead seek out different, maybe smaller, more curated, more nerdy events. And it sounds
Truly.
like this was that.
Yeah, it's funny. I have not written an op-ed for Open Banker yet, but you've written several that I thought were very
Yes.
good. People who can write op-eds, that is a special part of your brain that I don't think I have access to yet. I'm not at the age where I'm writing letters to the editor.
Did you just call me old? Was that like a subtle way of
I,
calling
I
me
think
old?
your
Is that what
brain
that
is
was?
just like a little bit more ahead of my brain.
I
Uh,
do have a very old person brain and like a young-ish but now aging
yeah.
body.
But I got to moderate a debate about interest rate exportation.
A fight,
And
really, is what it was, right? That was your
yes,
goal, was to start a fight.
I made them. So I like proposed that instead of me sitting at the end as the moderator, that I would sit in the middle. And then the ideological, like the side that the two people that I thought represented the state's position
Mm.
or the state's right
Hmm.
to have an interest rate cap and try to find ways to protect their customers or their control their banks, whatever, however we're gonna
Yeah,
pretend DIDMICA works. And
yeah.
then the two people that I thought would be more on the company side. And then I sat in the middle so that I could like comically turn my head when one person was speaking, you know?
And how did that work? Was it as visually and substantively engaging as it looked from the photos I saw?
Honestly, I think so because then it made what happened is because when I'm in the middle, I'm at the like, in the U shape. So it
Yeah.
made everyone look at each other. And
Um,
I think from an audience perspective, there was more tension than I
nice.
think most people have on a banking panel. And the other thing too that we all really agreed on in our prep, which I thought was really important, is that like we wanted to establish like this fight or this what this conversation was about, but then really move it and connect it to dual banking and federalism. And
Sure.
I think that was very useful for a lot of people to walk the audience through that way. And then really raise the stakes. That actually, we're talking about this thing, but it's really a conversation about this other thing. And so
Hmm.
that was like a fun reveal. Again, and it was like an hour long. So you really had time to make your points and go back to things. It wasn't just like the public signal. But then for
Hmm.
me, as the moderator, to feel like we were raising the stakes, building tension, the crosstalk was fun. I was making like faces the whole time to try to up the ante. So it was really
Sure, sure.
fun.
I like that. Again, I was very jealous to have missed it. There was a great picture from your panel where John Pitts had a look on his face that I don't know that I've ever seen, at
Yeah,
least captured on film before. So
I know.
it did seem like it was provoking strong feelings and debates. I very much look forward, hopefully, to going to the next Open Banker Salon because, yeah, that,
Yeah.
that looked like a lot of fun.
Well, it's June. There's a lot of
Yes.
things happening
Hmm.
in finance right now. So let's get to some of these topics. The first one, actually, I'll let you, because I think this is your favorite government administrator that
Yeah.
we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like we should have a special segment on the podcast with like sound effects where we go Pulte Watch, and it's Bill Pulte, currently director of the FHFA, and
Uh-huh.
more importantly, someone who, despite his lack of prior government service, his lack of really any credentials at all,
Sure.
has transformed himself into just the most main character possible in this administration. Bill Pulte is everywhere all the time, and
Uh-huh.
almost all of the really not well thought out ideas that sort of end up oftentimes just being a trial balloon that doesn't
Yeah.
go anywhere. But for a news cycle, it's what we're all talking about. Most of them involve and originate from Bill Pulte sneaking into the Oval Office with a poster
With a
board of
poster
some
board,
like
yeah.
presentation for Donald Trump. And so, very strong main character energy. And he was in the news again briefly because, and that's weird to say out loud because it doesn't sound like a real thing, but it did happen. was briefly picked by President Trump to replace Tulsi Gabbard as the acting director of national intelligence, DNI. I guess the idea when this was initially proposed was that he would remain in his roles as the director of the FHFA and as the chair of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac,
Sure.
while also serving as acting DNI, which is strange given that the director of national intelligence oversees more than a dozen different intelligence agencies and has a pretty big job.
Come on.
Yeah, just,
It's more of like a manager position, lots of delegated, right? It's got to be.
It's like a side hustle kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny because it probably is in some respects like that, but you don't want it to look that way. Like, you want the DNI to look busy and look like they just have like their hands completely full. Democrats flipped out when this was proposed and actually threatened to block renewal of enhanced intelligence surveillance authorities as leverage in order to prevent Bill Pulte from filling this role as acting DNI, arguing that Pulte didn't meet the basic statutory qualifications for the role. And in addition, and I think this is an important point, has a history of weaponizing confidential information against President Trump's political opponents, which, of course, he did in his pursuit to try to essentially compromise the Federal Reserve's role as an independent agency.
Right.
Apparently, this pressure actually worked. I'm not used to living in a universe where, like, people react to a news story like this and then actually, like, reality changes to conform with people's concerns. But apparently that actually did happen. And most recently, you were telling me that President Trump said that instead he would nominate Jay Clayton, who is currently the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, to be the next director of national intelligence. Again, based on this revolt. And I think maybe subtly also coming from Republicans in Congress who thought Bill Pulte was just a terrible choice for this role. Clayton previously served as chair of the SEC from 2017 to 2020, which again doesn't necessarily suggest a super qualified individual for the role of DNI, but at least someone who doesn't quite have the main character antics and energy of Bill Pulte.
Yeah, I don't know if this is just a Pulte thing or if I don't think there's anyone who would be qualified to both be the head of the FHA and the head of the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI.
I mean, I wonder if someone really, like a really great career intelligence professional, if you like looked at that person and you're like, I bet they could manage Fannie and Freddie. Like,
yeah, like
goes the
for
other
sure.
way.
It's definitely if one, then the other.
Right,
but
right. But it doesn't work both ways.
Intelligence, for sure. Yeah.
You start there and you work down to federal housing. Yeah, I think that's right.
But it was also, I just didn't realize you had so much free time on your hands if you were the FHA. I know home sales like aren't doing so great right now.
Not a lot is happening
and
there.
We're not,
I mean, like,
doing
he has
a
been
50-year
dedicating.
Mortgage.
No, we decided not to do that. I mean, he kind of has gotten, I guess, what he wanted out of the whole FICO bureau lowering the cost of the FICO score thing. And he's moved on from that. So, I mean, I do think celebrating this news, one of the people who probably thought it was a good idea was Will Lansing at FICO, who was tired of Bill Pulte making his life a nightmare. So
at what cost are we going to get rid of this?
That's the thing is like, I don't know that his peace of mind is worth it, having Bill Pulte in that job, but apparently sanity briefly has prevailed, Kiah. Yeah. So like a win. Can we move on? Can we chalk this up as a small win?
Yeah, close call, everyone. Bullying works. Nice job.
Yes. So, okay. Great work.
I wanted to talk to you briefly on what I think is a developing TBD story. So we've got some new buds on this, and the question is, are we seeing the triumphant return of the CFPB, or is this a zombie wearing a human skin suit? And the reason why I ask is because there were two interesting updates coming from the CFPB. The first was that the CFPB gave Bilt a stern talking to, and Bilt promised to never mess up people's rent payments again. So I'm glad I believe that was February that this rent, the first time, I don't know how many times it's happened since, but the first month that this was a major issue. So Bill got a stern talking to less than 6 months later, but probably not as fast as some people would have wanted. And then there was an announcement that there would be an appointed full-time director of the CFPB more than 18 months into President Trump's term. So I wanted your thoughts both on these news items And then also my actual question of triumphant return or zombie wearing a skin suit.
Yeah, it's a good question. Taking these one at a time, I mean, the built story was just strange, I thought. I mean, as you point out, this is happening well after the problems that built went through. So, what you sort of hope from a consumer protection agency is that they're a little more on the ball as it relates to consumers getting hurt. I guess it's good that they got involved at all relative to
Sure.
what my expectations have been for the CFPB under Russ Vogt. I will say that they emphasized the collaborative process that they went through with
Okay.
Built as like a little bit of a strange point of emphasis. So they basically said like, instead of a protracted investigation followed by a public enforcement action, which could be litigated for years before consumers get any redress, as the Biden CFPB would have done, this leadership engaged Built directly and collaboratively, resulting in a redress within weeks. I think that is both simultaneously sort of a roughly fair critique of
Sure.
some of the excesses of the Chopra era, where it did often feel as though the point was more to sort of like, go big game hunting than it was to like actually like solve problems for consumers, but also probably a significant overstatement of any effect at all that the CFPB had on this. Because again, by the time they got involved, Built had already worked through a lot of these issues. I think Built wanted to probably make these things right for consumers anyway. So
Sure.
I don't know that the current CFPB getting involved here really had a dramatic positive effect that wouldn't have roughly happened without them being involved. So
Yeah.
this collaborative process, I'm not sure like how substantive it actually was. And I will say, just as a question back to you, Kiah, like why Built? What did someone in the administration
Oh yeah,
personally get burned by this? Like
that
why
is
Built?
the joke, right? Like,
Yeah.
so your question, why Built, I think is a really important one, because the question is, does the CFPB have purview to do anything here? Like from its like legal and regulatory enforcement, from its edict or mandate. And
And I guess they didn't really need any because they just called them up. So it's like we just picked up the phone and called
right.
Ankur at Built. Like it doesn't feel like it went through formal processes,
Right.
but your point's a good one. Did they have formal authority?
And like that's useful information, because the next time there's like a banking as a service thing, Built is arguably functioning in some regards in a banking as a service capacity, or there's some
It's sitting
parallels.
in that kind of capacity.
Yeah. Truly, this feels like someone at the CFPB used Built, had a massive issue with getting the company to fix the problem, maybe getting their rent. Hopefully, like I don't hate it, like, because regulators are financial consumers too.
Sure.
And so if it takes that someone who works at the CFPB was personally inconvenienced, then great. I can't remember like what the status of the CFPB's complaint database is, but if that thing is still working, this seems like a good use of it, right? Maybe the CFPB got hundreds or thousands of complaints and was like, hey, I'm just going to go knock on the door. Now, what I will say is, in addition to like, okay, cool, it took like a couple of months, I actually, like, I'm a Built customer. My February payment failed. It wasn't as dire as other people, because I am very fortunate that I paid, like, I guess, like, I just can't pay my roommate anymore using Built or PayPal or whatever, Venmo, whatever. But also that I was in a financial position where I could make 2 rent payments for the month and not be totally screwed. I don't think that this announcement from the CFPB really underscores how serious I think it was that these payments failed. Rent is the single largest expense of most consumers, or their mortgage. They only have so many days to make it. Many people cannot afford to make 2 payments and do the rest of their regular financial lives in the first 2 weeks of the month.
Yeah.
And I wish that there were some more consumer protections for payments like this, for payments where if you don't make this payment, you could get evicted. It could be reported on your credit. It's funny because Wells Fargo, everyone was like, oh, there was some real harm. And I'm like, I kind of don't think there was a lot of harm on Wells Fargo. But like
You
missing
mean the
one
fake
rent
account
payment,
thing?
I don't think there was. I mean,
It's a
I
good point,
personally-
because it's more like egregiously bad corporate behavior, but not actually like that bad impacting
the credit
consumers.
score. Like maybe if the card was open and you never used it, that probably maybe knock a couple of points off. But it's not like someone like spent the money and then you never.
No,
paid
it's
it.
more just something that sounds horrific.
Yeah. But this was, I think to me, I hope no one I hope no one was evicted because the payment failed. I hope no one had serious financial ramifications. I hope all's well that ends well. But I think for me, the experience as the consumer was like, wow, I did not realize how important this payment was because I've never had this payment fail. And if
Right.
I've ever missed a rent payment, that's like kind of my bad kind of situation. I've never trusted a financial intermediary to do something for me, and it failed to do it, and it failed to do it on the one that I can't have this issue on. So those were some of my thoughts specifically about the built collaborative agreement or whatever. I kind of wanted to find, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's interesting. So on your point about certain transactions being more important than others, I actually do think that is an interesting thread to pull on, just in terms of like, we have the Electronic Funds Transfer Act that governs certain parts, but like it doesn't distinguish between different types of transactions, which I do think is kind of an interesting point. Like I wonder if a future CFPB.
Yeah.
Maybe the one that we're going to get under this new director, perhaps, getting back to that story in a second. I do think that is an interesting sort of consumer protection angle to pull on a little bit, where it's like, hey, we have this law that governs all of these transactions, but
Yeah.
within the scope of that, there are some that are naturally more important than others. If my transaction for my subscription to a video game streaming service doesn't go through 1 month and my access is temporarily interrupted, it's annoying, but it's not like life or death in any way, shape, or form.
Totally.
Whereas like rent or mortgage is a much more like existentially important one. So I do think there is something to that. The other point you make about this kind of rhyming a little bit with like banking as a service and Synapse and some of those things is I like it when the CFPB or other regulatory agencies get involved not so much in terms of like consumer redress and fixing a specific problem, but more patching whatever hole is indicated by the problem that happened. And our friend Jason Mikula did some great reporting on the built situation. And one of the things I took away from it was it's a very complicated stack under the surface, right? Like they
Yeah.
try to present it as a very simple, you pay your rent with a card, blah, blah, blah. But that's not at all mechanically how it works. And I do think what the built story has uncovered more broadly is the sort of ongoing systemic complexity of like bank, fintech,
Yeah.
payment arrangements and like how that stack works and who touches what and who's responsible for what. And I would like to see like rulemaking come out of the CFPB, the prudential regulators, whoever it needs to be, that addresses more like how do we make bank, fintech stacks
Yeah.
work better and create more accountability within those partnerships and those relationships. And to me, Built's another example of we had a problem because of that first principles
Totally.
problem that we're still not looking in the face and addressing. And
Yeah.
so I would never expect this CFPB to care about that or to dig into that at all. But if I'm describing my perfect world, that is something that I would like.
Yeah. Yeah. From your lips to God's ears. So
We can hope. We can hope. And then I guess the new director of the CFPB is also notable. I will say I don't know much about Brian Johnson. I know
Yeah.
that he served as deputy director under the last Trump administration from 2018 to 2020 when Kathy Kraninger was the director of the CFPB. Most recently, he's been, I think, a VP at Capital One,
Right.
focused on compliance. My general reporting on the CFPB over the years has sort of indicated that the Kraninger era was actually pretty well liked in terms of like internal, how
Yeah.
the agency was run. So I'm guessing that this is probably more of what you would call a normal pick for someone to run the CFPB.
Sure.
Again, wait to see if this nomination goes through. If he ends up as the full-time director of the CFPB, I'm sure Democrats in the Senate will have objections or concerns on this nomination. But I would very much like to see trying to think of the right way to describe this, what a politically responsive to the priorities of this administration CFPB looks like, but with an air of competency and
Yeah.
responsibility and genuine care for consumers and just lacking. I mean, one of the things, and I've written a lot about this under kind of the vote CFPB, this is what I would refer to as the OMB-ified CFPB, because there's a lot of sort of linkages between the two, given that Russell Vogt is in charge of both. There's almost like this like deep wellspring of hatred for just government bureaucracy overall that has really degraded the capacity of the CFPB overall. And
Yeah.
so I'd be very curious, what does the CFPB that still operates under the general auspices of what the Trump administration is trying to do,
Yeah.
but is run competently, what does it do differently? One example that I've thought a lot about is the war against the CDFI fund and CDFIs that's happening, which stretches across multiple agencies,
Right.
CFPB, OMB, Treasury, a whole bunch of different areas. But it would be nice if those types of ideological campaigns were a little less restricted from happening at the CFPB, which I think is generally an agency that has some bipartisan appeal, even though I think Democrats tend to be more in favor of it than Republicans do. So anyway, I'd be curious to see what that would look like, because honestly, the Kraninger CFPB era, with the benefit of hindsight, is generally regarded as something that people kind of liked and that people working at the agency were actually okay with.
It felt like ideologically different, but at least Kraninger felt like the CFPB should exist. And I think,
and she kind of ran it as like an institutionalist almost. This is a thing that should exist, and I'll run it in a sober way. She changed the
focus, but yes, it kind of it felt like the operations of the CFPB remained the same, and they were just directed in different places. Yeah. I think one of the things about Johnson, and I think this is like a broader issue that will come up in different places, is that we just you don't know how to interpret how serious this nomination is because of the damage to credibility. So he might be an institutionalist, similar to maybe his work under Kraninger, but the question, like the CFPB's kind of reputation has been so damaged, and there has been also such a withdrawal of resources that when they say they want to do things, that you're like, okay, well that's kind of ambitious, right? Like you do without adequate staffing. Yeah. Every time you say, here's a regulatory priority or supervision priority, or here's what we're going to focus on, something else is not going to get that attention. And so it does remain to be seen. It would be nice if there was like more stable leadership and that the agency head was more of a known rather than a known unknown. And also, I think it would be nice if like the person who headed, this is like such a thing about the Trump administration, but it's if you don't like the thing, you shouldn't be in charge of the thing. Yeah. Well, and that's how the vote era has definitely felt, right? Is like sort of a self-hatred for the thing I'm in charge of now deal. And I do think like it's notable that Jonathan McKernan was nominated to lead the CFPB and then basically bailed at the last minute and jumped over to Treasury. And so I do think that indicated that at least at one point in the Trump administration timeline, there was a clear signal internally that we are going to attack this agency and degrade this agency and cut it down to size. No defenders, yeah.
Right. And I wonder if this nomination, there's two ways to look at this nomination, right? One is the statutory timeline on having a temporary director ran out. We had to find someone to fill this role, and we're just going to pick Brian Johnson and nothing else is really changing. Yeah. Or alternatively, and to get someone nominated and pass the Senate, you have to nominate someone who's a little more mainstream than like a Russ Vought or one of his disciples would be. The flip side would be this actually marks a changing of the guard, a turning of the page, where now we feel like we've cut the CFPB down to what it should be from a statutory size, authority, power perspective. And now we can let it do its thing and put someone competent in charge of it. So that's the part I can't tell. Is this happening because Russ Vought's clock ran out, but nothing really has changed in terms of the administration's view on the CFPB? Or has the CFPB's sort of reputation inside the administration changed? Are they more comfortable with it now and want to put someone in charge to actually use it to protect consumers? And that's what I think we don't know.
So do you think it's a triumphant return or a zombie?
I would lean slightly more zombie just because until I actually see evidence otherwise, that's going to be my default assumption.
Unproven otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, does that seem fair?
I think, look, as a journalist, trust but verify. If your mom says she loves you, check it out. So I think it is, as a pessimist, but as like one that always feels like this is a defensible position, yes, this is logical. And the CFPB has been right to earn our distrust or need to prove itself. And I don't think either of us wants to have a zombie CFPB. So
I very much don't. I hope
yeah.
this represents a turning of the page and sort of a resurgent CFPB. And honestly, again, like I think even a smaller agency, maybe even a little bit of more of a depressed agency with less morale, it can still do things really effectively to protect consumers and to address some of the risks we were talking about, built and otherwise. So I hope it represents that. Kiah, can I give you one more, let's call it appetizer story before we
Yeah,
get to our main story?
please.
Okay. Your favorite topic, tokenized deposits. Woo!
Definitely know what they are.
You definitely know what they are. Definitely don't have any questions. They are back because the clearinghouse, the bank-owned real-time payments network, announced that it was going to be building, or I guess it was reported and then they sort of confirmed that they're going to be building a network to clear and settle tokenized deposits between banks on-chain 24/7, connected into its existing rails like RTP, with a targeted H1 2027 launch, so first half of next year. This structure using tokenized deposits would keep the same credit risk profile, same regulatory treatment, and same accounting approach as traditional deposits,
Right.
making it easier for banks to adopt digital payment systems under existing rules. And they are presenting this as the industry's answer to stablecoins without pushing deposits outside of the banking system.
Sure.
It was reported in the Wall Street Journal that the clearinghouse network is alternatively being called the bridge or the chain internally, depending
Okay.
on the bank that you're talking to, which doesn't necessarily suggest that they've nailed down all the details if we're not even calling it the same thing internally. They expect that large multinational corporations will be expected to be the first users, using it for things like programmable treasury operations, real-time liquidity management, cross-border payments. Interestingly, there was a quote from an executive from Bank of America in the Wall Street Journal story who admitted that clients aren't exactly beating down the door for tokenized deposits. And it was also reported by the Wall Street Journal that the clearinghouse has not yet picked a vendor to work with to enable the solution,
Sure,
all of which
nice.
suggests that maybe the H1 of 2027 deadline is not one that is going to be hit necessarily. Separately, I should also note that after this news was reported, it was reported that early warning services, which operate Zelle, and I think you could in some senses make the argument that it operates as a competitor in the big bank consortium world to the clearinghouse, sort of
Sure.
an alternate big bank consortium.
Many consortiums,
And
yep.
yeah. Well, it's like, which child is dad's favorite kind of a thing. So early warning services is also getting into the game, announcing that India will be the first international corridor for Zelle remittances.
Okay.
And unveiled Zelle USD or ZL USD, a proprietary US dollar-backed stablecoin that will support future international payment capabilities in India and then in markets beyond India. Kiah, being the expert that we know you are on all things tokenized deposits and stablecoins, what do you make of these two news stories?
Okay, can I first just say that I think interoperability is good. And so I think the
Sure.
Zelle thing makes sense from that interoperability standpoint and to understand who needs to send money to whom and how can we help with that. And
Yeah.
to understand, hey, if Western Union clearly sees a stablecoin use case, is
Yeah.
there any sort of can we expand how we think about our products and services to
Yeah. Western Union is like almost 200 years old. So there's a point to be made about just because you're an old established entity
Yeah.
doesn't mean you can't look at stablecoin seriously.
tokenized deposit? I still feel like I don't really understand what a tokenized deposit is. And nothing you said and nothing in the outline and nothing in that article really answers that first question for me.
Sure.
But what I can say is I am coming to appreciate that, when you're a bank reporter, you just kind of interact with this thing called deposits.
Sure.
And a thing called deposits is really close to a thing called money.
Yeah.
Money outside of a bank. Money kind of lives outside of a bank, but then when money enters a bank, it becomes a thing called the deposit.
Yeah.
And again, this is not really about tokenized deposits, but what I've been thinking about recently is trust banks. So what does it mean when I give my money into a trust bank?
Sure.
Well, it's not a deposit. These are non-depository institutions. So the
By
money
definition.
stays as money. It does not have the legal protection that a deposit does. But the thing about a deposit is it's a debt to the bank, right?
Yeah.
And it's insured. And then the bank does all of this magic, basically, to make it
Yep.
functional money to a customer. But then the bank also, as part of the magic, can lend it out, right?
Yep. Gets to use
And
it as
that's why
funding.
like everyone complains about fractional banking being like a Ponzi scheme, and
Sure.
like crypto hates this trick, you know?
I mean, it's like, it is a trick. It is a trick that involves a lot of risk, but we've also perfected it, is
Yeah.
the thing I always come back to with fractional reserve banking, where you're right in some senses, like it is a trick, there is risk, but we've completely isolated depositors from that risk.
Yeah.
And then we've learned how to manage that risk to a level that we find acceptable given the trade-offs. Like, it is a trick, but it's a trick we've practiced a lot.
Yeah. Yes. And like a lot of people don't want to think too hard about the magic. And so when I think about this tokenized deposit question,
Sure.
it's like, okay, are you just trying to tell me that the magic trick that you applied to the money in order to turn the money into a deposit is actually like extremely more labor intensive than I had kind of envisioned, especially when it
Sure.
comes to moving it around, right?
Yeah.
Are you just telling me that in the year of our Lord 2026, these big banks have trouble moving money between either one bank to another bank or like even from account to account? Like when I pay my Chase credit card from my Chase checking account, are you telling me that like the screen might update that it's been automatically applied or instantaneously applied, but like on the back end, it takes 4 days to settle? And I'm like, but you like literally just like, is this not just like money updated on one spreadsheet needs to be, like credited and debited to another spreadsheet? That's kind of what I feel like with tokenized deposits when I read this stuff. And like, that's fine. Yeah, I wish that you had way better technology.
Sure.
And that the technology also allowed for more programmability. Do I need programmable money? Not really. But like,
Sure.
I don't know. I got bills. Like Bill pays programmable money.
In a
so
sense.
that, I feel like I'm an archaeologist and I'm like uncovering what this thing is. And that at the end, it'll be like a full tokenized deposit. But like, I'm like the blind man feeling an elephant. And so I'm like kind of felt like half of the elephant. And I'll figure it out eventually. Maybe I'll even get access to a tokenized deposit and then it'll actually make sense to me.
Yeah, I think you're digging in all the right areas, to use your archaeology analogy, because when I was digging into the story a little bit, the thing that was interesting to me was there's plenty of individual banks that are exploring tokenization as a technology for managing money inside their walls, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So JP Morgan Chase is working on its own tokenization thing and has been for a while. Citi has its own sort of tokenization service that it's been building. Wells Fargo will eventually catch up to the bigger guys when it figures this out. So everyone is working on it. And what I've heard from those individual bank pilots or experiments with tokenization is it does solve some internal efficiency problems for them, which is, again, from your point, really hard to believe
nice
from
job,
the outside.
guys.
Like, are you telling me that like for large corporate multinational customers, there's a tremendous amount of cost and expense just moving money internally inside your bank? And what these banks would tell you in a moment of honesty is, yes, actually, it's really expensive. It's onerous. It's manual. It's not programmable. It's not easy to automate. There's just all kinds of things. We can't do atomic settlement between accounts. Like, there's just all these problems. And tokenization, it turns out, potentially, is by itself a technology that helps us become more efficient internally. Now, that does not necessarily mean that any of those benefits will accrue to end customers, right?
Sure.
Like if Chase is more efficient because of tokenization in terms of how it manages money inside its walls, that's great for Chase's bottom line. Yay, efficiency. That doesn't mean that like I'm going to get faster service or better service or lower cost service. Like those benefits don't necessarily have to trickle down to me, although they may. So that's like individual bank tokenization. That's one sort of version of this.
Yeah, happy for you.
Happy for you, yay. The other version of applying this technology is moving money between institutions, right?
Yes.
And this is where the Zelle piece comes in. This is where the clearinghouse network thing comes in, which is, okay, I'm a large multinational corporate treasury officer who needs to move money around between different countries and different companies that I'm paying, different contractors I have, employees, all this stuff. I need to move money all over the world. I think we do know and can say with some confidence that blockchains do allow for money movement internationally across borders to happen much more efficiently. than hopping through correspondent banking networks or doing any other things that you could do. That use case has a much more clear direct benefit to the end customer, right? Yeah. Now it is faster or cheaper to move money across borders and to be able to do this. The challenge I have with that, and this is why the Zelle versus clearinghouse example is interesting to me, I've always been under the impression that a stablecoin is a much better way to move money if you're moving money across borders because by definition, it is open. Anyone who has a wallet can take in this stablecoin. You don't have to be a part of a network. And so with the Zelle one, my operating theory, and I might be wrong about that, I'm still reading some of the reporting on it, but my understanding is that like with Zelle's stablecoin, I can send it to someone who doesn't bank with a bank that is owned by Zelle or that owns Zelle. I don't have to send it to someone in network in India in order for that to work. It can just go to someone in India that I'm trying to send it to. By contrast, with a tokenized deposit, in order for it to stay that legal distinction as a deposit that I have FDIC insurance on, that I can lend out, it has to stay either within the bank or it has to stay within the network of banks that agree to operate this tokenized deposit network. And so the clearinghouse launching this tokenized deposit network suggests to me that they're trying to get some of the benefits of interoperability and the ability to send money to other places, but they're not going as far as you can send money to anyone, because if they were to do that, it can't stay a deposit. It has to turn into a stablecoin. And obviously, that is not in the interests of banks from a business perspective to let deposits walk out the door. So I'm guessing that is why the clearinghouse is solving for large corporate deposits by doing this thing that looks more interoperable but still isn't totally interoperable, whereas EWS is solving for the consumer use case of, I need to Zelle someone who lives in a different country. Can you help me with that? And I think what that tells us is big banks are much more concerned about corporate deposits fleeing due to stablecoins than they are consumer deposits fleeing because of stablecoins. That's my very initial read on the difference between these two.
I think that's fair. And I also am wondering, the clearinghouse is clearly making what I would say are the rails that would go in between banks. But that doesn't mean that whatever tokenized deposit vendor tech solution they use, you would use if you were a bank, right? Chase might want a different tokenized deposit vendor for its internal back offices. And then there would be like a separate vendor for
can they be interoperable? Right. There's some real, that's why they haven't picked a vendor matters so much, is because there's some real interoperability technical questions that they're going to have to work through. And as we know with big bank consortiums, they have a hard time playing nicely together, right? I mean, like for every Zelle that happens, there's a dozen ideas that either kind of happen or don't happen or get killed in the very early days. And so, you know, consortiums are not easy to wrestle consensus out of. No. And this one feels like one that, to put it lightly, I don't think first half of 2027 is probably a realistic time.
Yeah, TBD on the what is a tokenized deposit? When will I get one? What will it do? But yeah, I have been thinking a lot more about the nature of deposits and the magic tricks and the powers that deposits have, not necessarily because of stablecoin, although in part because of the trust banks, but also because what does it mean that I have given a trust bank this money? What can they do with it? And then importantly, if it fails, who does the money belong to? Which is not as clear of a situation as you would like. And I can see those issues actually coming up with the stablecoin and with the tokenized deposits.
Oh, I very much agree. Yeah, I mean, the problem with a lot of this stuff is that consumers or end customers, whether it's a consumer or a company, they don't perceive all these technical differences.
No.
We abstract the magic trick away from them.
And they shouldn't. If our system works properly, they really shouldn't be doing.
Right. But when there's a problem, if we haven't perfected that part of the magic trick, then the consumer becomes, or the customer becomes painfully aware of the flaws in the magic trick. So that's the part that we haven't necessarily seen play out with all the tokenization.
Okay, well, Alex, that was some good bank chat.
We did our obligation to chat about banking stuff.
But it's not really the big news of the day. And the big news, for me, at least, I do love banking. I think about banking a lot. But lately, there has been just something taking up a little bit more of my time. And I wanted to talk about it with you.
Great.
And that's the 2026 World Cup. Alex, are you watching the World Cup? If what games and how are you watching it? Who are you watching it with?
These are great questions. I'm so glad you asked. I don't know if we've really talked this much about this on the podcast before. I know you and I have talked about it personally. My interest in soccer is not a universal thing.
Okay.
It's not a steady state.
Sure.
A sport I played growing up, I never refereed it like you. My interest is cyclical in soccer. But we are in the point at which my interest in soccer ramps up.
Yes.
Not just because it's the World Cup, but also because it's the World Cup hosted in my time zone.
Yes.
In the continent that I live in. And so, yes, the short answer is I have been watching the World Cup. I've watched, let's call it like 1 3/4 games so far,
Okay.
split across several different matches.
Yep.
I am streaming them on Peacock. So if anyone is
Are
looking
you
to
watching
get
them in
into,
Spanish too?
I did briefly, I think by accident, click on the Spanish language version and was like, actually, it wasn't that bad because I don't understand soccer anyway. So the fact that they're not,
Sure.
I can't understand the language doesn't really meaningfully change my experience of just watching the ball go back and forth. I have some questions for you about that later. But yes, I have been watching and I'm trying to pull my family into my burgeoning World Cup.
You have a son that
excitement.
plays soccer, right? So this is
2, as
his
a matter of
time.
fact.
2.
Yeah, my boys both tried soccer this spring. Soccer in spring in Montana, by the way, ugh, like it is really cold and awful conditions. I wouldn't say that they've taken to it like a fish to water, but they're somewhat familiar with the general mechanics of it, more so than any other sports, actually. So,
I think soccer is probably
get
the
it.
most intuitive of the sports.
kick the ball.
Yeah. Basketball's pretty intuitive as far as how to score, but I don't
Yeah.
think in the movement it's intuitive.
No, like
So-
soccer is great because it's like, hey, see that ball, chase after that ball, kick that ball into this thing. Like it couldn't be simpler in that
Yeah.
way. So I think they get it. Now, again, this goes to a question I have for you later. The difference between 5-year-olds playing soccer and professionals playing soccer
Sure.
is very different. And my experience as a fan, because I go to my kids' games and then I turn on the World Cup, the two games look very different. I
Yeah.
can't really discern strategy in either one, to be totally honest with you. So my soccer analysis skills are very rudimentary, but I'm hoping to sharpen them up.
Okay. So, yes, this World Cup is in North America. 48 teams, which is a larger pool than has been in the past. There are 104 games. I did a little bit of prep for this because I was going to force this topic if it was going to be the last thing I did. There's a $50 million grand prize. All 48 countries will receive $12.5 million. I have been reflecting on, we saw some of these games, what it means to bring in teams with this wider pool. So they qualified under the wider pool. And I don't know if you remember this, but in 2022, the U.S. did not qualify for the World Cup. We did not play.
Yeah.
Pretty embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so we saw one of the games this weekend, Curacao playing against Germany.
Yeah,
It was 7-1. There was, I think, a very clear, stronger team. Germany is a perennial powerhouse. Curacao first appearance, and they scored, right? 7-1.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what does it mean to have some of these like big uneven games, these uneven score lines, and like, should I feel bad? Should I be embarrassed? Should there be a mercy rule? Right? It can kind of bring up these like questions about, is this what we want in the World Cup?
There's sort of my mom always called it the they're someone's kids too thing.
Yeah.
Like she always felt bad for the team that got beaten up on because like she felt for their parents who were watching them in the stands. So this is a relevant question.
But then I was thinking about how important it would be to both have the broadcast rights, or you know how we have in football, like all these teams will play an SEC or an ACC school, and they do it for the broadcasting money, even though
they get paid.
Yeah, and that I was thinking about how much $12.5 million would mean to some of these country federations.
Oh yeah,
and that would maybe fund. I think about we're going to have the Olympics in 2 years, right? So like that might help the team that will go to the Olympics in 2 years, right? Or it might help develop some of the facilities, or it might get more. This is soccer, pro soccer is all about the development, going down from your national team down the ranks and ages to try to identify and train up your younger players. So I was like getting moved by that, and I was like, it's so important that like they scored their one goal and the joy and national pride. So that was really exciting. I am watching on Peacock. I get it free through one of my credit cards. And I am watching it in Spanish, which me and my Babbel from 2023 are getting such a workout with the Spanish now.
Yeah, you're
No.
not fluent, I'm assuming.
No, not even close. So far from it. Although I will say Telemundo is not showing commercials during the water breaks and the hydration breaks.
What do they show? Did they just show
They
the
show
field? Did they just
recaps.
talk?
Yeah, they
Okay.
show what's happened so far.
Hmm.
They'll obviously do color commentary. They might show the
Sure.
teams circling up and stuff. It's
Yeah.
fine. And so, yeah, I have the other thing too is I am not a big watcher of soccer. I do not watch a lot of EPL, Champions League,
Okay.
MLS. These are all streaming services. I'm not the most TV oriented person.
You're
I
not.
also I also referee a lot during games. I had a game on Saturday evening during games. And then someone asked me to come assess the game during the US game and I was like, I didn't even know that was legal that you could play a soccer game during the US game, but I guess
That's
like
not right. Yeah.
yeah. But I will say something that I'm watching is the referees.
Yeah.
The US sent, I believe, 8 referees. So
Okay.
so it's US and then we have the Continental Confederation. So ours is CONCACAF.
Okay.
CONCACAF sends 8 or appoints 8 US referees. 3 of those referees are women. CONCACAF appoints 3 or 6 women, female officials. All of these officials have had to pass the male fitness test or the fitness test to be in the World Cup, and they take it more
Okay.
than once in their training, which is pretty
Okay.
interesting.
That is important.
And then on the day this podcast comes out, the 3 female referees from the United States will be on the crew of the 12 p.m. Eastern game, which is very exciting. So I will
Fun.
definitely not watch that because that is during work hours, and I would never, ever, ever think about doing that.
No, of course not.
And then I'm cheering for US, obviously, and then
Yeah.
South Korea, and
Okay.
then Japan. So I'm cheering for the US teams and then everyone Asian. What about you?
Got it. I'm in a somewhat similar boat, actually. So obviously
Okay.
rooting for the U.S. 4-1 over Paraguay. That's not nothing.
That's not nothing.
Something. We're happy
Still got the
about
one.
that.
Still got not a clean sheet, but still got the
No,
still got the win.
that's true. That's true. And it's hard because does Paraguay just suck? Are we better than we thought we were? It's a little unclear, but from what I understand, like we looked pretty sharp, so
We looked
that's
good.
good. I think, and from my very preliminary research, even if we don't beat Australia, who's in our part of the pool, we will almost certainly advance out of pool play. So that's
Yeah,
great.
that's good.
So feeling positive, especially given that, as you referenced earlier, the U.S. men's team, it's been a process to get to this point. Feeling optimistic. I also have decided to adopt my wife's 2 adopted countries because
Okay.
she was actually born in Germany and then grew up in Japan. I have been
Solid
tuning in.
countries to have in the World Cup.
I know. Yeah, like I didn't. If she had been born in a country that had a terrible team, I probably would be like, she doesn't care. I'm not going to care. But
Yeah.
since she was born in Germany, I can like reasonably claim Germany as well. So they, as you referenced, crushed in their first game 7-1.
Yep.
Apparently, they have a 40-year-old goalkeeper
Wow.
who was on the 2014
inspiring.
squad that won the whole thing. So
Yeah.
like, like as someone roughly in age range, like I find that inspiring. And then my wife grew up in Japan, and so also I think I'm with you on rooting for Japan.
Yeah.
They do seem injured a little bit right
Yes,
now.
they've had 3 injuries, including their their captain that has
Right.
injured and then retired fully. It was just like, bye.
Right. You're like, okay. So that makes me a little nervous, but they had a first game that I
Yes.
briefly checked in on, but they
Yep.
managed to tie at the last
They
second.
did.
So that's exciting.
They
And
tied
I
a
do-
header, which I was like, I can make this joke because I'm Asian, but I was making fun of the height difference. And I was like,
Oh, sure.
stop playing the ball in the air.
Yeah,
and they
yeah, yeah,
scored
yeah.
off a header and it like hit 2 people's heads. And it was
so
kind of
funny.
amazing.
Yeah,
Also-
so very exciting.
Japan is staying in Nashville for the tournament.
Oh, really?
So,
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's like kind of the home team.
That's very fun. Are you going to go find out what hotel they're staying at and try to get autographs? Are you that kind of fan?
No, I'm not that kind of fan. If I know where their training facility is in Nashville,
Sure.
and it's like not in a cool part of town. And so I was like, wait, are they staying at? I know the hotels that are around there. They're not nice hotels, right? So like Nashville does have nice hotels. They're in downtown, closer to Broadway. The training facility is obviously kind of in a suburb. I've also been thinking like about how terrible the Asian food is in Nashville. So that's going to be a big adjustment. But
Well, don't you have some kind of responsibility to reach out to the team and just be like, hey, because you know the Asian food scene in Nashville better than
Yeah.
probably anyone? Shouldn't you be reaching out
We
to them
have-
and at least give them a list of recommendations?
we weirdly have a Japanese consulate in Nashville, which is kind of how they like came to
Sure,
be here.
sure. Yeah.
So I think those guys probably got it
They'll
covered.
take care of them. Okay.
But yeah, I definitely was like, you just have to go to Atlanta for your Asian food. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the other thing that is interesting about Japan, just historically, I think, is, and I actually remember this from the last World Cup, they end up in the most exciting matches. I'm not sure how exactly. It might just be their destiny to not win the whole thing,
Yeah.
but
like make them really try.
Yeah, so like I remember that Croatia game that went to penalty kicks last time, and I was like almost having a heart attack watching that, and I don't even care about this. You know?
I know.
And so like
It's the magic of soccer, Alex.
that's the thing. Like any sport, and I do think soccer in particular gets this way. Like I don't know. I feel this way about baseball too. Like a game that's kind of slow and boring in just a general sense. When it gets to the highest levels, and particularly when it gets to like extra innings or penalty kicks or overtime or whatever you call it, I am all the way invested in it. And I think it's because it's otherwise so slow moving and there's not a lot of scoring or whatever that when it gets to that point.
I'm going to fight you that you call soccer slow.
It is slow.
Soccer
you have to run a
looks
lot if
slow.
you ref or play. I get that. But on the television.
Yes. Do you know
it
why?
looks slow
Because
as
the
hell.
field is so big. Soccer
I get
fields are
it.
120 yards by 80 yards.
They're so big.
They're so big. So there's
and you
no
have
way
to
to film
conserve
it
your
that
energy. I get it.
Yes. That
No.
it looks slow.
It's like watching a car drive on a highway from a
It's like
distance,
F1.
right? Where
Have you
it's
ever looked
like,
at an F1 race and you're like, these cars look like they're going slow?
Totally. And it's like actually they're going as fast as they can possibly
Yeah.
go. So I totally buy that the difference between soccer playing or reffing versus watching, there is a difference. But God, watching it, you're like, pass the ball backwards. So like this is one of my mental blocks with soccer is like, I'm like, can we get to kind of the action here?
Football would look really boring if they had one camera the way that like soccer kind of has one camera. Football is exciting because they've got like 80 cameras at every angle.
no. I mean,
so it can
there's
make 10 yards look like high drama.
Well,
okay?
and like they have sound where they're crashing into each other and stuff. So like, I agree. I mean, there's a production element to soccer that doesn't convey the excitement of it quite when you're watching it on TV. But I will say, I think baseball is similar, right? Baseball is kind of this slow game. There's not a ton of scoring.
I think it's so rude you're making a comparison with soccer.
It is.
Super
like
boring.
No. It's they're the same. You just care about one versus the other. As someone who doesn't care about either.
Stop and go sport. Baseball has like
stop at soccer. They stop. They just stand there.
Soccer is a flow sport. There's stoppages. There's stoppages, but the clock never stops unless it's like certain breaks, right?
That's true.
Hydration break. The clock actually still runs in hydration, which is why we have to add the time at the end.
But I mean, like in soccer, I'll give you an example of what I mean. In soccer, there are people playing soccer who are in the game who stand still for large chunks of the game. In baseball, there are people who play baseball who just stand still until the ball comes to them. They are structurally similar games. They don't score a lot. It's sort of this, like, there is this flow to it. If you go to a baseball game,
in
you're
football,
just
they don't
supposed to sort
score
of
that much
like,
either. They just added algebra to it to make it look like they score more. Like a
Well,
football
that's
game
true.
will be like 3-2, but then you
But in
added
football,
6 to each.
both teams are like banging into each other the whole time. Like everyone is actively engaged in the game. I'm used to those types of sports, but here's the flip side to it that I do think is true. At the highest levels, games where there's not a lot of scoring become so much more tense than games where there's lots of scoring. My interest in the World Cup, I know for a fact, is going to increase proportionally as we go. And every round we go up, the stakes are higher. I'm going to care more. 1-to-1 is going to matter so much more to me. Penalty kicks are going to matter. Like all of this is going to matter. Like, again, ties are stupid, Kiah. Ties are stupid and un-American. And we shouldn't allow any ties. But when we get to a tournament where we have to decide who wins and it's single elimination, now you have my interest. Now I'm interested. So pool play where there's still ties allowed, but as soon as we get out of ties and we get to penalty kicks, you have my interest.
I will say, so one of the questions that I wanted to discuss, I have a very tenuous tie to banking, and we will maybe get to it. But I wanted to ask your thoughts on the tournament style. So I did not quite realize, like, this is very normal in soccer. There'd be, like, I'm sure with your kids, you go to tournaments, right? Like, they'll have their league play, and then they'll have tournament play. And at tournament, you'll be in a pool, and you'll play in your pool, and then certain teams get to advance out of the pool based on their total points in the pool.
Yeah.
And then you go into elimination. And it's single elimination. But the Knicks just won the NBA championship.
They sure did.
And they won
Yeah.
in 5 games, but they could have gone
Yes.
to 7 games, right?
Correct.
And something similar with the NHL, right? There's
NHL goes to
championship
7-game series too. Yep.
But the Super Bowl does not do that, right? The Super Bowl, I don't know if the Super Bowl has any. It's all single elimination the entire way, right?
All single elimination. Yep.
So my question for you, since you like sports, is which of these tournament formats do you like?
This is a great question. I'm so glad you asked it. I am a huge single elimination guy.
Okay, thank you.
I love single elimination. So, like, again, I think a reason the World Cup super intrigues me is win or go home is the best. And the way that I know that I like it, even for the sports that I follow more closely, like basketball, is March Madness is the same way. In fact, I would say that March Madness is actually the closest analog I have to the World Cup, because there is a little bit of pool play. Not exactly the way the World Cup works, but
it's like
there
the
are
regionals,
things,
right?
And like you kind of like have to like play your way into the tournament, and there's certain extra games that they've added to like expand the pool. And so it's kind of similar to the early stages of the World Cup, but then it gets to single elimination, and single elimination rules. Now, I will say, and I'm curious for your take on like the best teams and who's going to win and all that kind of stuff. One of the things about single elimination is it does allow for more variability. So like a reason that the NFL is so popular, I believe, is that no one really knows who's going to win, right? Like, you know who the better teams are, but like routinely a team will just catch
never
fire.
out until you're,
One, and like you can lose. Like you can be the better team, and if you played 10 times, you'd win 9, but the one just happened to happen to you and you're out. And like, I will say, as a fan of a specific team, that drives me crazy. Like losing when we shouldn't have lost and it's single elimination makes me lose my mind. But as a fan of the sport more broadly, if I don't have a very specific, intense rooting interest, I actually like single elimination. Makes it way more fun.
Yeah, someone pointed out that your point, the multiple game championship means that there's no fluke wins. For me as a soccer referee, like, the game's the game. And if you played really fantastic for 89 minutes and in that 90th minute, something fell apart and the other team pounced on it and made the most of it and made a meal of it, and you lose. Like that also, that's not unfair either.
That's a valid result.
Yeah. And like, it just, I don't know, sometimes like coaches will get mad if someone got mad once that like I didn't add enough extra time that he thought. And I was like, Coach, I wasn't aware that like you didn't think 90 minutes was sufficient gameplay for you. Like,
totally.
Sorry, I gave you 3 minutes and you wanted 6 minutes. We're really arguing about 3 minutes. Were you planning on scoring all of your goals in 3 minutes? And like, we're holding it back for the other 93. You know, like, it's just one of those things where, like, the game's the game. You kind of got to make the most with what you have.
Well, and it's a totality of it, too. My mom was a math teacher for years, and she always got a kick out of the student at the end of the year who'd come with, they got an 89. That was their final score in the class. And they're like, I almost had an A-. And she's like, but you didn't. You had a B+. And they're like, is there anything I can do with this last test or bonus work or homework to nudge it over to get an A? And she's like, no, your time for that was earlier. So I do feel like there is a relevant comparison there with soccer where it's like, it's 90 minutes. I mean, that's
so
a long game. That's the other thing about soccer that's so interesting to watch relative to the games I'm used to watching is like long game. There are water breaks, but there's no timeouts. There's one half. Like it's, to your point about flow, and I do think this is very valid, there is a lot of flow. Like it just goes back and forth. And
it does,
there's almost like a Zen quality to it where it's like you can kind of unfocus your eyes a little bit and just sort of watch it flow back and forth. And
it's
then
like hypnotic a little bit.
It is a little bit. And then you sharpen your focus when the ball gets closer to one of the goals. So like I've been trying to, my theory about sports and watching sports is there's a certain mental state you have to get into to enjoy whatever the sport is. And the frequency of each sport is different. And so I'm trying to sort of attune myself to the frequency of soccer. Kiah, I have several questions for you as an expert in soccer.
A rules expert. I feel like I need to be so specific. I'm a rules expert because I don't think I'm going to do a good job with some of these questions.
No. You have certainly more experience than I, even if it's like the one-eyed leading the blind here. So let me ask a couple questions. My first question is, who is the favorite? That's a very simple
Okay.
question. So let's start there.
Yeah.
Who's going to win?
So in doing some prep for this outline, because
Sure.
again, I was going to force this topic in a financial sense if it was going
I
to be the
know.
last thing I did in June.
Yeah.
I looked up the odds, the
Hey.
book odds. Now,
Yeah,
I think we're so
prediction
early into
markets.
the tournament, we have not seen some of these teams play. So
Sure, yeah.
that we are not going off of everyone played their first game, and after the first game, this is how the odds shake out. Bookmakers have Spain as the favorite to win the World Cup, then France behind,
Okay.
then England, Brazil, and Argentina. Argentina won last in 2022. So I think that's really
remember.
interesting. I do not keep up with the international squads enough to
Like who they lost.
yeah, to like, and the other thing too is like, outside of international friendlies, like Spain mostly plays England and France and Portugal, right?
Sure,
And then Brazil
sure.
and Argentina play each other, and then the U.S. plays our CONCACAF opponents. And then separately, to be so clear, this is the men's game, and I also keep up with the women's game. So it's a little different, right? There's a lot of soccer bouncing around in my head, but that's what the bookies say.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll obviously see how this plays out. The second question I had related to that is I'm always curious what the correlation is between the relative popularity of soccer in
Yeah.
different countries versus the odds that those different countries' teams have of winning, right? So like
Yeah.
which country has the largest and most passionate fan base? If just like we love soccer, we follow the team so closely that basically has like a 0% chance to win. And then conversely, which country might actually win, but their fans would be
doesn't
like,
care.
like that's fine. And
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by this because of how universally popular soccer is.
Yeah.
And yet like the skill level does seem very variable, right? There are teams losing
Sure.
7-1.
Yeah.
So I asked Claude this question.
Yes.
Because there's no chance I was going to
Yeah.
be able to like know the answer to this or even find out doing traditional research. And Claude suggests that for the country that loves soccer the most and has zero shot, it nominated Mexico as the choice. Apparently, I didn't know this.
I buy that.
They've never made it to a quarterfinal in the modern history of the World Cup, even though the country is nuts about soccer,
Yes.
obviously.
And it doesn't have another sport that is as popular or more
No,
popular.
no. I mean, it's like it is the game, and yet they've obviously made the World Cup many times, but they've never advanced to the quarterfinal. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
It also suggested India as a choice.
India's not even in the World Cup.
And that's the thing is
Like,
they
it's
have a
funny.
huge
I can't
population.
tell if it answered the question or if it like hallucinated because India's not in the World Cup.
Well, no. So what it said huge population that apparently is growing in its engagement with soccer. Like it's not traditionally the game that a lot of people in India grew up playing, but it's becoming more popular. And apparently, except for 1950, when they withdrew from the World Cup over a dispute about playing barefoot?
Sure.
Question mark. That's a detail Claude provided that I would need to verify, but that's crazy. They've never even been in the World Cup. So to me, like those are two good answers to that question. The inverse is which team probably has a pretty good chance of winning, but would be the least, whatever. And it suggested France, which obviously has won several times,
Yep.
including in 2018. And they're, as you said, one of the favorites this year. But apparently, and this is something I need to do more research on, the population's relationship with the national team is sort of oddly contentious, and there's sort of some politics mixed into it. And I guess there's just a general French cultural aversion to like any form of triumphalism at all. They're just
or like
oh, sports,
athleticism
whatever.
and
Yeah, like it's just not really who they are. Whereas Argentina, when they won, the whole country just went nuts.
Mm-hmm.
I think even England, if they were to win, they'd go crazy. So like, it does feel like France
kind of
is the
historical
choice there.
inventor of soccer or football.
Right.
I will say that, and like I'm gonna speak off the cuff, and so please don't get mad if I totally butcher this, but like
Sure.
France has, I believe, a long history of colonialism in Africa that has allowed, and the way that the eligibility for the team works is like involves some of their French colonies, or there was some migration from Africa to France. And
that's
so they
interesting.
have a broader pool of players. They have, I would actually say they have a very deep bench.
Sure.
And it is pretty hard to get onto the French African team. Or the French national team. And many of their players may have another eligible country that they can play for. So they really get their pick. And actually, like the U.S. is becoming like that too, because we have birthright citizenship allows for our best players to either give us the option to play for us or to play for another country where they have eligibility. But what I would say is that France might have a different relationship towards this group of players.
That's what I've heard.
Than maybe we do in the United States, although maybe we
Yep.
are probably becoming a little bit more xenophobic towards our some of these players. And so I can see that some of the racial and ethnic tensions between the players and the fans, and or between French citizens that might not feel like they represent the French citizenry, which is sad because you're just depriving yourself of joy and of people who are so proud to wear your national team uniform over the idea
your blues
of like,
and whites,
of like, but also like identity is created, right? But I know that like France has a very specific identity. It shows up in their language.
So, and they're very sort of protective of it. So that makes sense. So
but
like,
don't colonize other countries if you don't want them to be. In conclusion,
well, it is interesting that like both colonialism bad and immigration good are sources of strength for the national team. That is kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought of it that way. Actually, related to that somewhat, sadly, is I didn't know that FIFA's president had awarded President Trump with the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize.
I can't believe you missed this story.
I guess I was just paying attention to other things because this happened a while ago, but like, I don't even remember it coming up in the group chat.
So
Kiah.
I kind of, sorry I didn't put this in the information.
Well, you put everything else in there. Like I thought that might pop up.
I think this happened really closely to the Nobels coming out. And so when Trump doesn't get a peace prize, he
which
felt
he was
like
very
he should have
upset
received
about.
a peace prize. He has this meeting with FIFA, and I don't know if it was this year. It might have actually been last year.
Sure.
And so I believe this prize was created so it could be awarded to him, in part to make some of these conversations a little bit easier. And I believe it, like at the time, there was some concerns about immigration presence at airports or at stadiums. And so this might have been a way to mollify the administration and try to just really say, hey, it's really hard to imagine. Like even 2 weeks ago, I was like, I'm not super excited about the World Cup. And I'm not like super, super excited about the World Cup, but I'm significantly like I'm in with these like stories of the athletes, stories about the games, like watching, talking, debating. So it's really hard to kind of like remember what it is like to have these giant global sporting events, right? And especially like I'm sure you're on Twitter, but are you seeing like all of the heartwarming stories?
Well, that was another question I wanted to ask
coming
you.
To the US, yeah.
That's another question I wanted to ask you is what's your favorite Germans discover Waffle House or whatever? There's been a bunch. Yeah. What's your favorite one?
Okay, so I'm from the Midwest, from Nebraska, and the Algerian team is staying in former Nebraska rival Kansas University of Kansas, KU.
Yeah.
Which is in Lawrence, Kansas, which as far as I can gather is a small town in Kansas outside of the D1. And to see the citizens or residents of Lawrence, Kansas adopt the Algerian team, come out in force, the band learned the Algerian anthem for their open practice. They like, just the adoption I love. Fantastic. Also, so I love that. Algeria is playing Argentina. Tough matchup. But we're all going to be rooting for them. And then there is like a German guy driving through the Southeast right now, and his content is so wholesome that he's just getting like all of his experiences are getting upgraded, which is so funny. And then I have also come across Japanese tourists discovering mid-chain America steakhouses.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And I'm so into this. I feel so seen. And then it's bringing up the free bread conversations for me and my friends. So.
Yep.
What about you, Alex?
Those ones are all good. I can't remember which nationality. I think it was a person who was visiting to watch the games.
Yeah.
And they were discovering Waffle Houses in the South. And they were like, this is incredible. It's open all night. And so this person is just obsessed with finding every Waffle House anywhere near where any of the games are. So I've enjoyed that quite a bit. I've also enjoyed the like sort of just big crowds who like are like supporting different teams, obviously.
Yeah.
But are just like bonded by their love of soccer and their excitement for the tournament overall. So there'll be these big crowds who are like cheering for each other or kicking a soccer ball around and they're like videotaping or whatever. So there's a lot of wholesome internet content, which I've really enjoyed. Kiah, maybe you can help me and the other folks listening who are maybe tuning into soccer just temporarily here. What's one tip you would have for how I can watch these games to sort of like get some of the beauty of the subtleness of soccer out of the experience? If I think soccer is boring or I have a hard time watching the action, what's one little piece of advice you can give me of something to watch that I can pull from the experience to enrich it?
So it's really hard for me to think about soccer not in the context of rules, and that is not how everyone experiences sporting events.
I'm asking you more like an aesthetic question.
Yeah. But I was going to say, if you're someone who wants to understand tension and moments that I would say change the game.
Sure. Yeah.
We call that, in soccer, we call this set pieces, and they would be, I would say, if you think about a soccer field and you divide it into thirds, in the attacking third of a team. So imagine like about 30 yards from the goal line, kicks that, or within that range, those kicks have a way higher percentage of going into, or like going to the net, being a goal.
Sure.
So what I like to think about, especially as the referee, is like making sure that the fouls that are called for the attacking team in this area of the field are correct. And the question is, like, sometimes they're like really big fouls. You can get sent off for doing these fouls. Sometimes they're really small fouls. They can be like a shirt pull. They can be like a little ankle clip.
Because the team playing defense also knows that like a set piece is coming and like you need to really,
So those are like moments where they lead to a lot of goals, which means that the lead up and awarding that foul is really important. And so that's actually probably like, when I train referees, I talk to them about these moments, about those calls, because they're a subtle moment that can really change the game. And so we want to make sure we have really good position. We have really good angle. We want to make sure that these are righteous calls, right? We want to make sure we're not just giving the attacking team a gimme foul. But I was even watching, what was the team? This like European team, and they were taking throw-ins and they were able to throw them into the penalty area, which means that the throw-in itself was becoming strategically important to this team. The first goal was scored, it's Czechia versus South Korea. The first goal was scored from a throw-in. So if that happens in a game and I'm the other team, I got to make sure we're not giving throw-ins that they can score off it, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I think recognizing to like increase your read of the game, which I think will increase your enjoyment of the game.
That's what I'm looking for.
Focus on those calls that, and then understand their importance to changing the outcome of the match.
Got it.
So
okay, that is very, very helpful. Because like watching it, the scoring comes out of nowhere sometimes. Hockey reminds me of this too, where I'm like, oh, he scored, and so
it was a break,
so I'm trying to sort of like be able to find the difference between the ball's kind of flowing back and forth and then, something's about to happen, and like the build and the anxiety that goes with that. I will say watching it in a public place, which I have done a couple of times. I haven't with this World Cup, but I did the last time. I do really enjoy that because then I can cue off of the other people who are there. So that actually there is a social element to watching even sports I don't understand very well, because the people who do understand, you can see them get tense. It's like watching a movie with your parents when your parents laugh and then you laugh and you're like, oh, okay, I don't know why that was funny, but they thought it was funny, so I think it's funny. There's a social contagion element to watching soccer, I found, that I might try, especially as we get into the later rounds.
Yeah.
They're even in Montana. We don't have any games being hosted here, but we do have some bars that are real into soccer, and so I might try to watch a game or two with other people.
Yeah. Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
I could talk about this for forever, but I feel like we have drawn out this podcast. And so if anyone wants to hit me up with some of their thoughts about the World Cup, especially any fun banking angles,
I was going to say, is this going to make it into your newsletter?
Honestly,
is every newsletter going to be themed
I probably
World
should,
Cup?
right?
Yeah.
Like once every 4 years, now's the time. I might as well just go for it. It's my newsletter.
Whenever the question comes up of, should I really write about this? The answer always in my head is, it's like my newsletter. I can do what I want. So like, I encourage you, like, it's your newsletter. Do what you want. Just make it all World Cup.
I write a lot about how bank examiners are soccer referees, and I
Right.
hope everyone is thinking about that as we watch the World Cup and we are wondering about some of these calls and like how the calls are delegated. I and the chain of kind of reporting and command. So I hope that at least I can bring some appreciation, hopefully to and some love to the referees who have worked so
That's
hard to
right.
be there.
That's
And I
right.
wish that our Somali referee was able to join them, his colleagues. But yeah,
Well, I wish you a lot of luck in all of your rooting interests. I hope U.S., South Korea, and Japan
in
all do
Japan, in that
well.
order. Yep.
Okay, all right. I'm with you actually on all of those rooting interests. I'll adopt South Korea
Yeah.
as well. Germany's like my hedge because they're
Yeah,
really
of
good, so
course.
they
I mean,
actually
we
might
gotta have,
win.
yeah, you gotta
So
have a European team in there, sure.
yeah, yeah. So Germany's my European team. So I'm feeling good about this. Thank you, Kiah, for my
Yeah.
deep dive into soccer in the World Cup.
Thanks for talking about this with me, and I hope you discover a passion for it, and maybe in a couple of years we'll get player comps, fintech player comps.
That'll be the next project. I need to
Yeah,
get smarter on it, and then I will compare fintech companies to soccer national teams or maybe soccer
exactly.
players. All right.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.